Did you know that men and women in Norway are seen as almost exact equals? Now, that's not something we're really used to hearing because here in America, women have struggled with equality for a very long time when it comes to things like voting and even now, in the modern day, getting equal pay to their male coworkers. But in Norway, men and women are seen as equals, which shows that the cultural expectations and the cultural values in Norway are vastly different than they are in America and far different than they are anywhere else in the world. Um, Comparing this to Alaska, Alaska has a very similar climate and weather, and most of us that are watching this video are going to be living in Alaska, but the cultural climate in Alaska is very, very different than it is in Norway. So first, we'll start with a brief overview of Norwegian culture. And the first thing I'll go over is Hofstede's results, where he used a few different variables to examine countries. And the three I'll be going over are individualism, masculinity, and power distance. First, let's start with individualism. In Norway, people generally value their achievements. Individualism is around middle of the scale, and people have pride in what they accomplish and value it, but they don't overvalue it, as they wouldn't want to breach the cultural communication standard that Norway goes by, which is the Jante law, which is discussed later. And people don't want to breach that, they don't want to brag about their accomplishments, but they do show pride in them. The next one we'll go over is masculinity. Norway is very, very low on the masculinity scale, getting an 8. And this means that a lot of the masculine traits that you will find in Norway, you will not find. You will not come across materialism, you will not come across power, you will not come across masculinity in general, and assertiveness especially you will not come across. A lot of those masculine traits are just not present in Norway. And the low masculinity also shows that women and men are seen as equals. They are seen as equals. Women are high up in the corporate ladder, women get the same job opportunities, the same pay, and everybody in Norway is seen as equals. And finally, for Hofstede, the power distance scale, power distance shows they have a medium to low power distance, so they have equality among people. And that also is backed up by the masculinity scale, with men and women being equal. People of the same gender are equal to each other as well. And this also means that there's a smaller wealth gap. There are less rich people, less homeless people, poor people, and generally most people hover around the middle class. And another general overview about Norway is that Norway is a very friendly country, but they have strict cultural guidelines. Nation Master shows that Norway has far less crime than America does, which leads to there being generally friendlier people. You're more likely to walk down the street alone at night than you are in America. You're more likely to do that in Norway because people there are just friendlier. Crimes happen less often. So there's a few cultural recommendations I have if you ever find yourself traveling to Norway, doing business in Norway, or anything. The first recommendation I have is to respect people's personal space. This goes to nonverbal communication basics, where it can communicate so many different things, such as the respect you have for someone, how comfortable you are in a conversation, whether you're in a relationship with someone. All of those things can be conveyed through just how close you're standing to someone. So in Norway, they want people to treat other people's personal space with respect. And WikiHow and Culture Crossing both say that around an arm's length, so 1.5 to 2 feet, is standard in Norway. And breaching that would be disrespectful towards their culture, and unless you are given explicit permission by someone to breach that cultural guideline that is the arm's length distance, as if you're trying to pursue a relationship with someone or you're a close friend with someone, then don't do it, as that would be disrespectful to their culture and uncomfortable for most people. Now, money expectation and practices are far different than they are in America. And Full Suitcases and WikiHow both say that tipping is not a cultural standard in Norway. In America, we're used to getting that receipt and seeing that tip line, 15, 20, 25%, whatever it may be, and it's generally frowned upon to not tip your waitresses or your taxi drivers. But in Norway, it's not an expectation at all. Waiters and taxi drivers and people that live off tips in America are generally paid very well in Norway and don't need the tips. It's standard every now and then for exceptional service to give a small tip. If you feel like you have been treated well by the waitress or the taxi driver, then you can tip. But it's not expected at all. Now, in Norway, most people pay with card. People do not pay with cash very often. And I would recommend, if you're traveling to Norway, you don't need much card. And you should use a debit card over a credit card, because if you use a credit card, the conversion fees from Norwegian krone to US dollars and back can rack up pretty quickly. So I'd recommend using a debit card. Maybe carry a small amount of cash with you, but it's not necessary in Norway almost at all. Now, the final recommendation I have, we've been over personal space, we've been over a general overview of the very equality-based country that is Norway. But this final recommendation I have is Jante laws, which I touched on earlier. Jante laws have to do with both verbal and nonverbal communication in Norway. Basically, when it comes down to it, Jante laws are don't brag about your own achievements. Don't put people down for their own achievements. If they don't do something as good as you don't want to put them down. It's a very anti-materialistic country, and you don't want to put yourself on a pedestal that you might in America. People in Norway are not valued by how much money they have or what job they have, how valuable their job is to society. People in Norway are more valued on the content of their character, as Kamasio Global describes in their article. So a few examples of Jante laws, there's about 10, but I have a few examples, such as from Scandinavian Standard: you shall not think you are special, you shall not behave as if you are better than others, you shall not think you are smarter than others, and you shall not laugh at others. That goes to communication from verbal to nonverbal. Laughing, obviously very verbal, communicating disrespect and animosity towards someone you can convey by laughing. And obviously nonverbal things too as well, like your mindset. You don't want to put yourself on that pedestal. You don't want to believe that you're better than others, because it may show through in your actions and your nonverbal communication that you think you are better than others, which is disrespectful to Norwegian people. Now remember, these Jante laws are not actual laws. They're not going to get you put in jail, but for cultural communication in Norway, it's very important to respect them and stay true to them as much as you possibly can, and don't breach the general, don't brag, don't think you're more special, don't think you're better, don't value your material objects, don't think you're a better person because you're a doctor over a waitress or anything like that. You don't want to breach those. So overall, Norway is very different to America, very different culturally especially, and Norway heavily believes in equality among all people, regardless of gender, regardless of race or anything. Norway believes in equality. That's their big thing. So remember, when you're in Norway, keep that 1.5 2 foot distance from someone. Respect their personal space, as you don't want to convey the wrong nonverbal communication and disrespect them. Money is also way less valued in Norway than it is in America. Although things are more expensive in Norway, you don't want to be gloating about how much money you have or how much better you are than someone else. So in Norway, I would also recommend carry on a debit card, don't carry on cash, don't show off your money. And of course, last, probably the most important, Jante laws: don't brag about your money, don't think you're better than other people, and respect the cultural standards that are set in Norway. So overall, I think Norway is a very interesting country to learn about, and I think if you ever get the chance to visit there, you should take up a couple of these recommendations, if not all of them.